and welcome to another episode of Sunday Musicians Café. I'm Pietro, an Italian violinist and founder of this podcast. I hope you are all good and spending a Sunday afternoon with us, chilling from, I bet, a busy week of work. Today, we are going to have a chat with Benjamin Baker, an extraordinary violinist from New Zealand. And I just want to take a second, first of all, to thank all of you guys for the wonderful support and sweet messages that I received in the past days and today especially, because as you can see, I just hit 10,000 followers. So it wouldn't be possible, even this project, with all your support. And so thank you so much for following. And again, it wouldn't be possible because all of your feedbacks, comments and suggestions also, they helped me a lot, and they still help me a lot on growing and improving my type of content and also this podcast. So if you're new here, welcome, and let me tell you quickly what is all of this about. It's a project, is an online podcast that I started myself last year, still alone, by the way. And today we hit episode 43, and I'm very happy we are having it with an extraordinary violinist such as Benjamin Baker, which we are going to invite in a second to talk about many things, including musician's career and how to be a violinist in this crazy world. So thank you so much for all the following. I know you guys are very curious normally to know about musicians' life, and so if you have any questions also during our chat, do please drop a message here in the chat below. You can ask questions and hopefully we might be able to answer them. And but in general, if you want to DM me any curiosity you have about musicians' life, or what it looks from the inside, right? So it's nice to also see that you follow this podcast from all around the world. So as I said, I hope you are having a wonderful Sunday afternoon, but it might be morning or evening where you are at the moment. So I hope I'm not disrupting all of your the normal day of your life. But thank you so much for staying and following. So as I said, we are going to have a wonderful chat with Benjamin Baker. He's an extraordinary violinist and much more. You will see he's an artistic director of a festival, and he does a lot of stuff. And I saw him the other day in Royal College of Music here in London. So he's based in London as well. And he was assessing a competition for violin players. So he is one of the top, obviously, and I'm really looking forward to have a chat with him. But do please, again, tell me how are you guys and where are you listening from? It's always very interesting and very helpful to me, for me also, to see that people are listening from all over the world. So let's invite Benjamin and have a chat. Hey,
Hey.
how are you? All good?
Oh, good. Yes.
Amazing.
Great. And you?
I mean, very good, very good. How are you? You're based in London, right? You just said.
Yes, exactly. So I'm home at the moment in East London.
Fantastic. So you're enjoying the sun that we are having these days. They are warming up our days.
Yeah, absolutely. For a minute there, like a week ago, it felt like we were skipping straight into autumn.
Yes, yes. It's crazy. The weather here is crazy. It's very English to me to talk about the weather, even though as you guess from my British accent, I'm not from East London. So, please, what you having today? Tea, coffee, water? What you
Uh,
having?
Coffee.
Coffee, nice, nice. Oh,
Hmm.
my team, on my team.
Yeah, 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 and happy to share it with you.
Usual espresso after lunch, it's like a rule.
Oh yeah, for us too. In fact, I think like probably like the sort of pinnacle of our kitchen, or at least like our favorite bit, is the espresso machine.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Espresso machine is like one of the first thing you buy when you have to move in. When I had to move in, at least, it was one of the first thing, I have to buy an espresso machine. I didn't have a sofa, I didn't have, but that was even more important.
First things first.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Wonderful. So again, thank you so much, Benjamin, for allowing us to have this wonderful chat with you today. And as I said, you're a Kiwi, as I can say probably because you were born in New Zealand, but you said you grew up in the UK, right?
That's right. Yes. I mean, yeah, first of all, thanks so much for having me. And also on the weekend, you passed 10,000 followers. That's really fantastic. Like,
Yeah.
congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, but but yeah, so I was born in New Zealand, and just kind of was growing up in Wellington, the capital city, and with the Suzuki method. And then I mean, I really loved the violin, and it was kind of my passion from very early on. And then around when I was sort of 7, 8, 9, a few people realized I was quite good. And actually, Nigel Kennedy, who was one of the sort of most famous violinists at the time, and still is to a certain extent, came to New Zealand, and he happened to like be coming to Wellington. I got a chance to go to his concert. My dad managed to wangle an invitation for me to go meet him backstage. The highlight of my life up until that point, I happened to be learning the Bach double, and he was like, "Oh, great, man! Why don't you play me a bit?" I started. He joined in. We played the rest of the first movement. Absolute like pinnacle of my life as a 7.5-year-old, and he suggested that I thought about applying to the Yehudi Menuhin School, which is where he grew up and studied music as a kid. And I guess sort of about a year, 18 months after that, me and my family were moving to the UK to start studying at the Menuhin School, which
Wow.
probably, yeah, the first really big step in my musical life.
Wow. Also, I mean, it was a big decision for your parents, I guess, as well. Uh,
Absolutely. I mean, now that I look back at it, I think like, what were they thinking? Like, are they crazy? I mean, obviously, like I had some family, like our family was already sort of split between the UK and New Zealand and a little bit in Australia, so it wasn't like we were coming to coming to no one. We had some people here, um, but when I look back, I think the most one of the wisest things they did was that I mean, number one, it was incredibly generous and like supportive to make that move, to make that possible for me, because coming by myself as an 8-year-old would have been nearly impossible. But as we all know as musicians, like it's a bumpy road. Like there's so many kind of challenges we have to overcome on a sort of weekly, monthly, yearly basis. And there's times we love it, times we hate it. And particularly through my teenage years, there were times I was far more interested in football or computer games or something else. And I was like, do I really want to be a violinist? And my parents always reminded me that even though we'd come to the UK for me to study, if I wanted to do something else, I could. And literally just that single fact I look back at as probably the most extraordinary thing, because it meant that even though they made that incredible sacrifice, it meant that like doing music was still always my decision and something that is mine. Because I think it's very easy as musicians, so many people support us and make our journeys possible,
yeah.
to do what we love doing, that we can end up feeling pressured or, God forbid, trapped.
Yes. 100%. You touched a very important point, which is what I believe is one of the most important, I guess, growing up, which is not just being free of doing things, but also feeling free, right? So it's a big difference. And I see it in many students sometimes that I teach as well, that they have to decide themselves that they want to take that path. And I think every one of us, somehow we went through a moment in which we had to take this decision by ourselves, so to really take it as it was our own thing, not just. And it's so wonderful from your parents that they let you decide, obviously. And this is obviously the encounter with Nigel Kennedy marked you clearly, because that was, yeah, I mean, that was the recognition to your parents as well, that you had talent, and which is obviously very true. And by the way, I mean, Nigel Kennedy is such an incredible violinist, and also to me, he wasn't one of the biggest inspiration, I have to say, when I was growing up, but definitely his recordings. They were like, because my dad, which was not too much into classical music, but still loved to listen to music, also classical. And Nigel had this touch, different touch, also with the Four Seasons. That was big deal, and he made it really worldwide. Like super famous. And my dad was putting that Four Seasons of Nigel Kennedy all the time, and I remember I was really struck, and I remember I still hear it somehow. Obviously, it was not one of the biggest inspiration I had in my life. I mean, People that follow me, they know that Heifetz was the aesthetic of Heifetz and everything. I'm very kind of old traditional. I'm really sorry.
Nothing wrong with that.
I know, but you know that aesthetic for me was honestly, my eyes were like hearts because I really appreciated that aesthetic and but that's wonderful. So you moved to the UK to go to the Jedu Menuhin School, which is one of the best school in the UK, if not the best, probably, right?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's the amazing thing is the UK is blessed with some really, really extraordinary music schools for kids, you know, sort of
Yeah.
8 through 18. Whereas, of course, in New Zealand, when I was there was literally nothing like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was just extraordinary chance to come and kind of grow up. And of course, you study all those other subjects, but music is the main focus. And I made some of the most wonderful friends that still are very close to me, and we all sort of grew up together, sort of a mixture of like I'd like to say almost passionately geeking out about music
Yes.
when we weren't playing football.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, that's I did football as well, but a sport is always there anyhow. When we do when we are active kids, it's always like that. But curiosity, I mean, did you had a chance to meet Nigel Kennedy again in the UK afterwards? Or?
Once, a very, very long time later. Essentially, like he came with his jazz band to a church near where he lives in North London, and I was just very lucky that a good friend of mine worked with this church a lot as and did concerts there, and so I managed to wangle a ticket because that concert was totally sold out. And afterwards, I got to go backstage and sort of tell him the story and just say, look, you know, I don't know how much you remember, but you know, I guess that was probably like 17 years later. But you know, 17 years ago, you came to Wellington, New Zealand, and you met this little boy and suggested he came to the UK to study. And if it wasn't for that moment, I probably wouldn't be here now. And thank you.
Did he remember or not?
I think he did. I think he did. I mean, that or he's a very good diplomat. It's very hard to tell.
Yes, of course, of course. But are you in touch somehow with him now? No.
No. Not especially. And I think like you too, it's like he was sort of my first inspiration as a violin because of that Four Seasons disc. But of course, yeah, through the rest of my life, I've had, you know, many other sort of mentors and influences. And, you know, of course, I think like every violinist, I had my Heifetz phase. And I grew up, I studied for a long time with a Russian teacher called Natalia Boyarsky.
Okay.
And she, and kind of with that school and everything, then I of course had a long time with, you know, the Oistrachs and Kogans and so many others as well.
Yeah,
and I think it's kind of the amazing thing is that, I don't know, at least for me, that's something that's constantly evolving. It's like the kind of
and I think is the idea. I don't know if you had always this feeling, but we know this. I mean, in the industry, especially for violinists, somehow we have when you somehow when you grew up in a certain way, and I mean violinistically talking, so you identify somehow with a certain group or a certain school of thought, let's say, yeah, and somehow I think I always found that a bit you know, like too how would you say,
like
not
restricted or confining.
Yeah, kind of, you know, like, and because I'm very curious and I always appreciate also new ideas and so in a way I think new generations, more the past, they are more open probably to change professor quickly, to maybe change perspective on building a career as well, or how to play as well. They technically maybe to change, which is obviously somehow I think it could lead to a negative effect, which is having too much information instead of following one path. But I see the balance. What do you think about this?
I mean, I think it's definitely true, and definitely true of the modern world, isn't it? That like information overload is a very real thing. However, I think I'm definitely from the same kind of I have the same desire as you, that like there's so many people, musicians could have just played with or studied with or even just heard, but you see someone doing something and that inspires you. It makes you reevaluate how you do things, and it makes you it moves your thinking forward, because something about being I mean, I think almost anyone in a creative industry, like whatever kind of outlet you choose, if it's creative, I think almost there's an element of what you do that isn't being a problem
Yeah.
solver. And that thing, if you never quite know where that light bulb moment, that little spark will go off, and where it will come from. It might be from a great artist, or it might be from the young musician who's struggling, with things, and he comes to us. They come to ask your advice, and in kind of having to problem solve for them, you realize something about you, and
Right.
it's a really diverse picture. And I think in that way, almost the more influences, the better.
Yes. I mean, I agree. I agree, actually. I do agree. It might be controversial to someone, but I actually do agree because I think you should have you should maybe, what is important is to have the tools to understand that you are then the owner of your own path, right? So not to be influenced in a negative way. So you end up doing things that you don't like, actually. Yes. So that's important to understand, to grow your own tools, especially to to I would say discern whether it's good for you or not,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, but this I think is part of everybody's growth. I mean, maturity as well. It takes a big, important part of our life, and the way we grew up as well changes a lot. The way we look at people, the way we look at mentors. Yeah, so. So I think this is also like psychologically is a massive topic. So it's not just we can't really relegate that to the way we learn violin. So, but definitely, you said the more influences, right, the better. Do you think nowadays to build a career, networking is like key element, or because in the past you win a competition and then people start to know you, and maybe you. But still today, there are some violinists. For example, if I may quote one, which is um, I think it's Santana. I think his first name is Brazilian violinist, very young. He won a competition in one of the big ones, yeah. And I remember looking at the some articles talking about him, and the professor is not that known, right? He's not that, but he won the competition. So it looked like a bit like from the past, a thing from the past, because nowadays, you have this. I don't know, like maybe group of professors, you know them, right? And if you come from the school of them, that school, you know that you're going to be prepared. It's not just a reference kind of thing. But to be fair, I mean, nowadays I think networking is quite important. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's such a big issue, probably for everyone in the world right now. And I think the truth is, I don't think it's any more or less important for us as musicians as it is for anyone else in any other
Mm.
profession, walk of life. I think like we're always going to be striving to be the best we possibly can be. To particularly in anything where there's any element of competition, to differentiate ourselves, to be able to express ourselves in an individual, unique, authentic way to us. Now, I think the only thing maybe right now is with the speed of things. I mean, just for instance, social media is such a phenomenally powerful tool that just wasn't available for musicians, more than, I mean, definitely 30 years ago. And so the way that we interact, the way that we discover things, we find things has changed, but in a vacuum, it also doesn't necessarily give us the answers we're looking for. So I think in a way the biggest challenge is for every individual to come and actually like build their own like architecture, their own kind of like mechanism by which they can achieve what they want to achieve. And for some, that will be more reliant on networking than others. But yes, it's also probably true that it's going to be involved in some way for everyone, almost surely.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, I agree totally, and I think it's very wise to also remind ourselves that we are not that special. I mean, in every job, in every especially today, as you were saying, I mean, it's kind of the networking and social media are affecting every field of every job, probably, no? So if you become, if you go in a certain circle of people, at the end, if you're working in finance or music, it's basically the same, no? I think, but what would you suggest to a young person, no, today? Because obviously, somehow, I feel that way. So the level, the technical level of violin playing or instrument playing, it's very polarized. So you have extremely high level like that we never reached in the past. So, but I mean, thankfully, probably nowadays it's much better, right? But and so technically, there are certain people that are very prepared and a very I would say mediocre way of playing that, you know, like is not virtuosic, but they can play obviously violin. And then you have massive amount of musicians which they never go to school, they never went to school, but they actually work in the industry, right? So and they are musicians, right? And obviously here talent is a big topic, big, obviously, yes. But in a way, what I'm trying to say is that in building the career, I think it should be more clear from the professors or even especially in a young age for the student to understand which of this category you want to belong to, right? Because it's a very different path. We cannot treat the same way someone that comes into conservatory because of someone that might end up doing just gigs for, you know, like it's not the same. We can't lie. I mean, we cannot sell. I think this is unfair in a way, no? We are selling a degree as one of the top we can sell, and then at the end, the person is not actually looking for that path. So I don't know. What do you think about this?
I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting things to unpack in there. I think for one, it is that idea of pathways. I think also sometimes the way those pathways are presented are more exclusive or more rigid than they might necessarily be in real life. And for instance, changing direction is okay. I think something that often comes with a sort of, you know, like in all of us somewhere is a desire, a sort of a pursuit of excellence, and we want to be the best we possibly can be. But that's only a small part of the picture, and that sometimes we can look inwards actually, like too often, when actually also an important part of our life is to look outwards. Like one of the biggest challenges for us is not to describe what we do to each other, but to describe what we do to someone who's never heard it before.
Oh,
Um,
I love this.
and in a way, like that's something that maybe as a community, like we don't necessarily think about, particularly actually like at a young musician level. Now, the truth is too is that like whatever we do with networking, whatever we do with promotion, whatever we do to get an opportunity, a gig, a performance, whatever that may be, there is always the hard truth too that like once you have even just one person in a room listening to you, whether that's in a quartet, a solo, in an orchestra, suddenly none of that matters because we have like a unique opportunity to engage like that listener, and that's what this whole thing is about. But the truth is sometimes, and I know I've fallen into this trap too, but like it can become like uh, almost sort of, well, we need to broaden those horizons.
Yeah.
Like look at the overall picture, look at the whole kind of thing, and then I don't know, like when I look out at the sort of well, the world, and I think about young musicians, and I almost feel glad that I'm just like sort of as old as I am, because you know it would have been. I'm not saying it was easier for people older than me, or necessarily so much harder for people younger than me, but there's very unique challenges, as there probably is for every generation.
Yes.
But but the truth is, like, I think more than ever, like perseverance is kind of just the number one thing.
Yeah.
None of us can ever be sure when something's going to work or not work, and we just have to kind of keep doing whatever we can to keep coming back, to keep trying, and probably also open-mindedness, because like the world is very loud right now, and I experienced this growing up too. That like everyone's got an opinion of
Yeah.
what they think you should be doing, and it's worth like gathering all of those perspectives. But at the end of the day, like remember, you're the one who has to plot your own path. You have to make those decisions. You have to put one foot in front of the other, and no one can do that for us.
100%. You're speaking very wisely. I mean, you're saying truth. I mean, you're speaking facts. I mean, this is absolutely true. And you touched a very sensitive, I think, and I can sense that you thought about this before, right? And you have an experience, obviously, of as you said. I mean, you fall in that trap as everybody, but you have this sensitivity where that shows that you understand that the young generation now might have different problems from the past or different challenges. Yeah. And do you think maybe nowadays, differently from the past, maybe we have more psychological challenges to face, like even in the way we play? Like, what do you think?
Um, I I think that could well be true for a bunch of reasons, and I don't think it's also probably not exclusive to musicians either.
Like,
I think, um, I mean, I actually like even just like my sister's a few years younger than me, and my first smartphone came when I moved to college, and her first smartphone came sort of sometime in her mid-teens, and just there's something about the kind of the speed of information, the kind of the constant influx um, of yeah information content coming our way that makes it kind of very, very easy for us almost to not necessarily lose ourselves, but to kind of like lose connection with ourselves. And like so much about any pursuit, anything where we're trying to improve ourselves, we're trying to learn something, we're trying to kind of be better tomorrow than we are today, like requires quite a lot of like self engagement and effort. Exactly. And that's the thing. Like I struggle every day with like sort of not getting distracted, or kind of trying to get done what I want to get done,
yes,
and the world just keeps getting in the way. But that's the thing. Like, I mean, if every person, like more than ever, every person has to define their relationship with technology, with like how involved they want to be, and it's very easy for us not to be able to escape things that might actually be negatively influencing us. And so in a way that kind of like that personal direction, that personal discipline, that like just as you said, like just on the basis of like maintaining a kind of healthy
yeah.
state of mind, that strikes me as probably there's never been more difficult.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as you were talking, I mean, I was thinking that you clearly have this view on and sensitivity, that I just mentioned, and I think it might help your job as well, as you're not just a violinist, right? But you're also an artistic director of a festival, and I think this is the what we were talking now is one of the skills that you have to have as an artistic director, because basically you are deciding what could be the music, how the music could fit, right? And in a way, you look at musicians and artists with this kind of experience that you just mentioned. So tell us about this artistic director job that you have. How is it? Do you like it?
Oh, oh my goodness. Yeah, so that's a very long story, but also is kind of, I mean, it's become one of the biggest creative breaths of fresh air in my life, and also kind of like what you described and what we've been talking about. Like the truth is, like yes, it's definitely any position of direction of any kind, but particularly artistic direction, where in a way anything is possible. It it require it however broad your horizons and perspective, like you're going to need more. But the truth is also is that like is the number of things that having that opportunity of being in that position of artistic director has taught me. is kind of like, I mean, the festivals, I guess I should start with the festival. So the festival is, it's called At the World's Edge Music Festival, which takes place in the Queenstown Lakes region of New Zealand, in New Zealand's South Island. Now, for me personally, this dream kind of started somewhere sort of in my late teens, where, you know, I was already in the UK, but music was taking me back to New Zealand quite regularly. And like living in a place of sort of creative saturation and just constant kind of new influences all the time in a place like the UK is, you know, it's the best place you could possibly be as a young musician. And of course, contributes to that, you know, thriving creative ecosystem here in the UK. And a part of that is the way people can transit through the UK on the way to places, and it's accessible and there's lots of people around. No one transits through New Zealand to anywhere. You either go to New Zealand or you don't, unless you're going to Antarctica. That might be the one place like you transit through New Zealand to get to. But that does have an effect on just particularly on young musicians and the way that the creative ecosystem works. Now, there's many fantastic organizations who bring amazing musicians to New Zealand to perform. But what I realized talking to my peers when I was a teenager was that they weren't really getting a lot of chance to connect with those musicians. Like, they'd see them on stage, maybe have a masterclass, but that usually was kind of it. And all these musicians knew that to really stretch their wings and challenge themselves as young musicians, they needed to come to, you know, basically to the Northern Hemisphere somewhere. It could be Asia or Europe, the UK, North America. But they didn't really have any frame of reference as to like how to make that work. And so they kind of, like many do it, but they kind of, is a massive, massive leap of faith and takes a huge amount of support to do it. So one of the founding ideas of the festival was to bring some of these artists to New Zealand, and through the festival they perform side by side with some of New Zealand's best artists, and every year we bring some of the best and brightest emerging artists as well. And kind of over about sort of 2.5 weeks, we do sort of 10 days of performances. We go into a whole lot of local schools. And it's like, the idea is really sort of like a connection point, an environment for this kind of creative cross-pollination to occur. But of course, the most important thing with actually anything like this in a festival is also the who's it for. You know, we were talking about the kind of the looking inwards and looking outwards, and the true opportunity and where it's been possible to build the festival together to this point was because there was a real opportunity and a real need in this particular community in the South Island of New Zealand. It's extremely beautiful, but it's known for extreme sports and skiing. You know, it's where bungee jumping was invented and all this kind of thing. But actually, there was no regular music event quite of this type that was there and kind of also like designed not just to bring people to the area, but to actually kind of like engage with and support the local community. And so I guess in about 2017, I met a violinist in New Zealand called Justine Cormack, who was one of the founders of the New Zealand Piano Trio, who was basically like actually one of only two chamber music groups making a living full-time from chamber music in New Zealand. And she was about to leave her position in the trio and move down to this area of New Zealand to build a house. And we started chatting and realized that we both realized like this opportunity and also this need in those communities. And so kind of from that point, we started talking basically every week from wherever in the world we were. Me in a variety of places, her quite a lot of the time in Queenstown and the Queenstown Lakes, but essentially we started talking about this in probably early 2018, and really, together we built the festival to what it is, and we're about to have our 4th festival this October.
Wow.
Happens every year, the first half of October, which is springtime in New Zealand.
Right.
And that's the thing, it's been an absolute joy, privilege, an enormous journey. And I think the truth is that like I have learned like more than I could have ever possibly imagined from this journey with it.
Of course, I mean, it sounds, as you were talking about it, it's very involving, and I could sense how much you loved every single step on building this. And I believe, and I did some project too, very small, not that big, but I know perfectly that there are hard times as well. And I was thinking immediately, how did you manage with COVID? I mean, it must be so difficult as well, because also you live in the UK, you were traveling all the time if anything would happen there, I guess. Or
Absolutely. So I mean, the truth is we were going to launch the festival in 2020, and of course we all know what happened that year. Um, so we delayed it a year, and we actually launched in 2021, um, which
still it
which
was COVID.
was still COVID,
Yeah.
and and that's the thing. Like it,
That's, I mean, first of all, I mean that takes a lot of courage, first of all, and also, I mean, you are against the grain for sure.
yes, absolutely. No, I mean, of course, there were many factors that made that possible. Like number one is that we already at that point had just an amazing team of people around that kind of were willing to
Mm.
entertain essentially that level of risk, that kind of like with all this kind of planning. Of course, you have plan A, plan B, plan C, but COVID was COVID. Like, there were certain things just you could never plan for. Um, but we did manage, and of course, part of that also was how was keeping a careful eye on how New Zealand was coping with COVID as well. And because they did close the borders, that angered many people, of course, and caused its own troubles. But it did mean that infection rates were sort of to a certain extent more under control, and they were quite successful with localized lockdowns. Also, this part of New Zealand was quite rural, in like the South Island in general. So there was not a lot of COVID in the South Island. So we sort of took this calculated gamble. But probably um, the most unforgettable part of it. I mean, well, no, the festival was unforgettable that it happened at all, but it did mean that I had to go through quarantine to get into the country,
Right.
um, which was an incredible experience. Also, flying to New Zealand at a time when no one is flying, being on one of these huge planes with maybe 10, 12, 15 people on it. It's just a crazy thought as to how they kept anything flying at all. Um, but then, yes, spent 2 weeks in a quarantine hotel, which was supervised by the military and the police, and it was very well run and a very strange
You
experience.
could manage the festival from there? No.
No, I mean it was so. I mean, in a way, like being locked in a room for 2 weeks is a great time to catch up with admin. So
Yeah, right.
so the
Yeah.
so the
But so
truth
this,
so the truth is, I was probably going through quarantine maybe 2 or 3 weeks before our first festival, and so actually there was plenty to do. Like, and my Justine and I, my partner, we were chatting and setting everything in place. So I wasn't bored.
fantastic. I mean, I was about to ask you because you mentioned one name, no? But how many people you work with for this festival right now?
I mean, essentially, it's just the two of
Okay.
us. Um, I mean, we have a obviously for the charity that I guess is the festival. We have a board who work very hard with us. Um, but essentially, it's Justine and I that work year round with the sort of the direction of the festival. And then from last year, we started being able to have a little bit more on the ground help during the festival because I mean, the festival started as a sort of a long weekend of concerts, and now it's 10, 10 days plus 5 days in schools. It's sort of like
Ah,
it's a lot to handle, and so we work with a fantastic events manager and someone helping with the handling press side of things too. But they come on a part time basis a few months before the festival to sort
nice.
of
Nice. No, congrats. I mean, I totally feel that it's gonna be a wonderful thing in the future as well. And I wish you all the best because obviously, if I have any chance to go to New Zealand, I want to go to this festival at certain point. So
oh, we'd
ah,
love to have you.
maybe one day. But I mean, you're super busy, but I had one question, and I always ask this at the end of the chat. If you have any curiosity, by the way, guys, you can drop a message here. We can try to answer them. I don't know if you have any, but I do have a question, which is the last question I always ask at the end of every chat, which is, what would you say to your younger self?
Oh, my younger self. Don't worry. I think when I look back, a lot of the times I feel like I was more anxious than I needed to be. I think probably it's just a healthy approach to life. We have to be comfortable with embracing uncertainty. But I think particularly as musicians right now, you know, how sure can any of us be with, you know, the direction of so many things in our world in the next 12 months. But I think probably what took me a long time to get comfortable with was the not being sure, and also the sort of I guess being okay with picking myself up after a rejection or a no or something I was upset about or didn't go as well as I hoped. Picking myself up again and just going, well, you know, it's a new day, let's try again. Because I mean, I genuinely feel very grateful and privileged to be doing what I'm doing now and to be able to make a living doing it. But yeah, I mean, essentially, so many of my mentors that I look up to still now, I firmly believe they're working as hard now as they did when they were 30. And I think that was probably a belief that took a while for me to let go of, that there's no such thing as sorted.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as, you know, we're just, you know, it's like, right, this, you know, we've got this and this, and now we're done. It's going to be great, and it's going to be fine forever after. And I think the truth is, yeah, for anyone striving to do anything creative, anything that is new, anything that challenges people, challenges ideas, it's always going to be like I guess, I mean, almost part of the fun of it is the pursuit, is the perseverance, is the journey, I suppose.
Wow, I love all of those words you you gave us. I mean, no, honestly, I mean, it's so important nowadays to make sure that we don't project too much expectations on things, and also being able, as you said, to accept rejection and take it as a starting point for a new thing. It might sound cliche, but actually it's not. I mean, you were off the records, you were at a college now for a competition, right? And for sure there is someone that won and someone that didn't, and that is a small rejection, and we always receive the rejections, and we to have rejections more times than actually winning moments, right? Because
Yes,
it's maybe 1 out of 100 times that you try. So
doing well.
yeah, exactly. But it's like with auditions, it's the same, right? So it's so important that nowadays we can really look at rejection in a way that is without any without looking back in anger. I think without looking back with anger to ourselves, to our younger self. So I love your suggestion of being like, don't worry, to say to your younger self. It's so heartwarming. I like it.
There's one thing that came to mind too, which is that I think it's a Woody Allen quote, but it's something like, you know, sort of 90% of life or some percentage is just about turning up, and it's definitely that thing of, you know, as a young musician, just always go and ask a question. You know, I mean, that's kind of, you know, the other day in college, like, in a way, like, the privilege I had was that actually most of the musicians did come and ask afterwards, and so I did get to have a chat with them, because actually the picking a winner is kind of
Very hard.
it's
Yeah.
very hard, and almost in the long run it's neither here nor there, and like and like on the other side of the panel, you know, on the other side of that line, it's 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 not especially fun really, because it's almost boiling down what we do as musicians to something too binary. Like the fact is that everyone came that day, and they did their best, and they communicated something. And so the fact that I managed to did manage to talk to most of them and sort of say how it came to me and give them just a, you know, a perspective, and gathering those perspectives I think is really important. I actually thought of one other thing that I sort of want to tell my younger self, and that's actually about this: the we can never be sure how things can work until we try. And if we're willing to try hard, we never are sure what might come out of it. Now, like obviously, like the festival in my life has been a huge learning curve in that way. But even in the solo side of my life, as a touring violinist, um, I would almost say the same is true. Of that, you know, we're kind of we're quite, you know, we're very aware of how often like the musicians sort of create an international profile platform, and then tour from that, and you sort of always imagine that it has to be with essentially celebrity and fame, um, and these days, yeah, kind of huge social media following basically the ability to reach huge numbers of people, but from one point, like from one point of access. Um, and the thing that's actually sort of astonished me the most is that I would not put myself in that bracket. Um, but actually, the truth is that I almost every season I sort of assume it's like, you know, this is fantastic, but surely next year will be a disaster. You know, like I'll do everything I can to work to make it work, but you know, they'll figure it out, and then suddenly will be the time where, you know, it all finishes. And I probably started thinking that like 6 or 7 years ago, and I'm still here. Um, but there's also that unique opportunity as a musician to, you know, we play to people, we connect people, we meet people, um, and whether you're famous or not, you have the ability to make a connection to and build relationships with people that mean something to you or interesting to you, and you never quite know where that might go. And where I look at now is like, you know, I I live here in London. I spend, you know, a good chunk of the time, you know, the year here and in Europe. I spend maybe 2 to 3 months in the States. Now, that's, you know, that's because of some extraordinary people over there who believe in me, but also a sort of a musical family over there. And I feel extremely, you know, like it's really lucky to have that kind of cross pollination in my musical life. And then, of course, there's a festival which takes me to New Zealand and Australia. But to be in a position with kind of almost three musical families, that enables me to kind of be inspired by all three, um, is really quite extraordinary. And if I tried to tell myself that 10 years ago, I'd go, "You're an idiot. Like, there's no way that could possibly work." Um, but yeah, that's one thing I've sort of almost surprised myself, that I'm still here and doing what I love doing in the way that I love doing it. Even though probably even most of my mentors would have gone, you know, 10 years ago, my mentors gone, doesn't sound likely.
I mean, but as you said, I mean, and the way you talked about your life. By the way, I love the idea of having musical families around the world. It's not just having a gig, a job, or a tour doing that, but you're meeting your own family in another part of the world. Well, that's fantastic idea of way of looking at the our career. That's wonderful. I love it, and I
Winning
wish I could have family around the world like you having, and fantastic. But as you said, I mean, life keeps surprising us, and I think that kind of spark of hope, maybe that a surprise will come if we are consistent, and we trust in the in this process of building a career. I think is very important. So thank you so much, Benjamin, for staying with us today in this wonderful episode we did, and this fantastic chat. So please, guys, do follow Benjamin if you don't do that yet, and look at the fantastic festival he organizes. And so thank you again, Benjamin, and I'll hope to see you in London maybe one day. And so guys, thank you for following. And I didn't read any of the messages, but I saw some of them, so I'm gonna read through it. What a wonderful insight, very informative from Rachel. Thank you, Rachel, so much for your comment. And then there was someone else commenting about how lovely was the chat. So thank you very much. And this Sailorman69, deep and enriching thoughts from both of you. Thanks a lot. Thank to you for following. And if you're new here, please follow Benjamin and me as well if you want to see more episodes of Sunday Musicians Cafe. See you next one.